Benedict Castellani hadn't raised his voice at his mother once since he was old enough to understand the world he'd been born into. He'd never kicked down a door either. On the night he did both, he was driving across Chicago with one sentence rehearsed and ready a single question for the maid who'd cleaned his floors for 11 months, the one he'd thrown out of his house at midnight without ever asking her anything at all. He never got to say it, because when his shoulder took that door off its latch, Maya Kelly wasn't hiding, and she wasn't alone. His mother had her backed into the corner of that little room. Vittoria Castellani, 63 years old, pearls at her throat, standing over her with a face white with a rage. Benedict had seen maybe twice in his entire life, one hand clamped around Maya's wrist, the other forcing a pen down into fingers that were shaking too hard to hold it. There was a contract on the table beside them, signed at the bottom by a witness, waiting on one name, and Maya had gone down on her knees under the weight of that grip, 26 years old, one hand flat across her stomach, sobbing so hard she couldn't get the words out clean. Please, please don't make me sign it, please, begging a woman who wasn't listening. Nobody in that room heard the door. So for one second, Benedict Castellani, a man people cross streets to avoid, a man who'd built an empire on never once losing his temper, just stood in that doorway and watched his own mother do it. If you're already hooked, hit that like button and share this with someone who'd want to hear how it turns out. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment of it. Now let's get back to Benedict, that doorway, and the piece of paper his mother drove all the way to Pilsen to make Maya sign. 11 months before that night, Maya Kelly sat at the last corner table of a diner on 18th Street, between the morning shift and the evening shift, filling out the job application she had kept folded inside her coat pocket for 3 days. Name, 26 years old. Address in Pilsen. Cleaning experience, yes. References, no. She paused longest at the line, asking whether she had ever worked for a family on the North Shore, then left it blank, because the truthful answer would have gotten the application thrown away before anyone reached the second line. The opening was for a full-time housekeeper at an estate in Winnetka. The listing didn't include the homeowner's name, only an address, and Maya had known that address by heart since she was 13, because for 20 years her father had driven there 6 days a week. Sean Kelly had been a driver for the Castellani family since before Maya was born, then became their bookkeeper because he had a good memory for numbers and a mouth that knew how to stay shut, which, according to him, were the only two qualities anyone needed in a man like him. 3 years earlier, he had died in a car accident on his way home. 6 weeks before that, his name had come up in an internal audit, attached to the figure of $1,200,000 in embezzled funds. No one ever took him to court. It was enough for that number to be spoken aloud in a room powerful enough to matter. Enough for the house in Bridgeport to be sold within 4 months, for the two sisters to move into a rental in Pilsen, and for the name Kelly to become something people lowered their voices to say. Maya folded the application, returned the pen to the diner, and called her younger sister on the way to the bus stop. Maeve Kelly, 19 years old, in her second year at the University of Illinois, answered after the first ring, the way she always did during the weeks when tuition was nearly due. I turned in the application, Maya said. What application? The cleaning job. Where? Maya stayed quiet long enough for the answer to speak for her. Maya. Where? Winnetka, Maya said. For exactly 3 seconds, neither of them spoke, and then Maeve said, in the very calm voice she used only when she was truly panicking, that did Maya understand what she had just done, that this was the house of the people who had destroyed their father's name, that in movies it took people 40 minutes to reach a decision that stupid, while Maya had managed it sitting around waiting for her evening shift to begin. They didn't kill Dad, Maya said. They just let him die carrying that name. What's the difference? A lot. Maeve let out a hard breath. What are you planning to do in that house? Mop the floors, Maya said. Maya, listen to me. Maya stopped at the curb so she could say every word clearly. Dad kept their books for 20 years. Everything he ever wrote down is in that house. Not at the police station, not in a courthouse, not anywhere you or I can request access to. I've called 3 law offices. None of them would take the case. I've written to 2 newspapers. Neither one answered. There's exactly one way left for me to get inside that house, and that's through the servants' entrance. I don't like this, Maeve said. Besides, I can handle this semester's tuition myself. I'll pick up more shifts at the library. This semester's tuition is $4,800, Maya said. The library pays you $14 an hour. You're better at math than I am. I hate you. I know. I really hate you. I know. What about Dad's hospital bills? Maeve's voice had changed. Still all there, Maya said. The call ended there, with neither sister saying goodbye, exactly the way two sisters who had learned to survive on unfinished sentences had come to end most things. Maya got on her bus, worked the evening shift, made it home close to 1 a.m, and 3 days later her phone rang from a number with no name attached. On the other end was the voice of an older man, polite and spare with his words. He didn't ask about references, didn't ask why the North Shore line had been left blank, only asked whether she could get there on her own using public transportation. Maya said yes. He told her to come at 9 o'clock Thursday morning and hung up before she had time to thank him. Maya sat down on the edge of her bed. She had submitted 17 applications in 4 months. 16 places hadn't called back. The 17th called after 3 days, didn't ask a single question about her past, and immediately gave her an appointment time. That detail should have made her stop, but she had waited 3 years for a door to open, and when a door opens after 3 years, people rarely stop to ask who opened it. She thought about the blue, covered notebooks her father used to carry back and forth, the ones no one had been able to find in the house after the funeral. She thought about the last thing he had told her over the phone, that he was dealing with something, that she shouldn't worry. Maya Kelly believed she had just slipped through a gate. She didn't know she had just been allowed inside. At 9 o'clock Thursday morning, Maya stood outside the gates of the Winnetka estate after 2 train rides and a bus trip, and the gates opened before she could press the buzzer, which meant someone had been watching her walk the entire final stretch of road. The man who led her inside was an elderly gentleman with silver hair and an upright posture, walking half a step more slowly than she did without saying a single word. He took her to a small sitting room in the east wing, knocked twice, then withdrew. Inside, a woman was already seated with Maya's application lying in front of her. Maya had prepared herself to meet a housekeeper. She hadn't prepared herself to meet the lady of the house. The woman didn't stand, didn't offer her hand, only gestured toward the chair across from her. "Sit down, Miss Kelly." Maya sat. "My name is Vittoria Castellani," the woman said. "I manage this house. My son manages everything else." She picked up Maya's application, glanced over it, then placed it back in exactly the same position. "You left the North Shore line blank." "Yes," Maya said. "Why?" "Because I thought if I filled it in, I wouldn't get called." Vittoria gave a single nod, as though she had just heard a number that matched one she had already calculated. "Your father drove for my husband for 11 years, then kept the books for my son for another 9, she said. 20 years. He was never late once." Maya had prepared 4 answers in her head for 4 different questions, and none of them fit the one she had just heard. "You know who I am," she said. "I know who everyone is before they walk through the gates of this house," Vittoria said. "That's my job. Yours was the only one of 17 applications I read for more than 30 seconds. Maya felt a chill move down her spine. Not because the woman had raised her voice, but because she hadn't. "Then I'll leave," Maya said, beginning to rise. "I didn't say you weren't hired." Maya stopped halfway up. "Sit down." Maya sat. Vittoria folded her hands in her lap. "Over the past 3 years, 4 people have tried to get close to this house because of what happened with your father," she said. "1 journalist, 2 contingency fee lawyers, 1 person who sent a letter. Every one of them was stopped outside the gates, and every one of them left without my ever knowing what they intended to find. You're the first person who applied for a job cleaning floors. I allowed you into this house because I want to know what you're looking for. People are easier to watch when they're within sight." Maya looked directly at her. "Why would you tell me that?" "Because I don't like wasting time," Vittoria said. "If you know you're being watched, you'll be more careful. And if you've come here to take something, I'd rather know beforehand than discover it too late. The pay is $22 an hour, 6 days a week, with lunch in the secondary kitchen. You have Sundays off. You don't go to the 4th floor. You don't enter the study when the door is closed. You don't mention your father to anyone in this house. If you agree to all 4 conditions, you start Monday." Maya was silent for 3 seconds. She knew very clearly that those were the most expensive 3 seconds of her life. "I agree," she said. Vittoria stood, and for the first time during the entire conversation, she smiled. A courteous, controlled smile that never reached her eyes. "Good. I like people who understand where they stand." "On Monday," Maya began. The house had 31 rooms, and it took her 4 days to remember every passage connecting them. By the end of her first week, she had built a map inside her head, and that map had only one point that truly mattered. The study was on the 2nd floor, in the west wing, at the end of the corridor, behind a dark wooden door that was always closed. That was where her father had kept the books during the final 9 years he worked there. She was allowed to clean the hallway outside it every morning. She wasn't allowed to enter when the door was closed, and the door was closed almost all the time. On Friday, an older housemaid told her the room received a thorough cleaning once a month, and inside were 3 built-in filing cabinets, with the key kept by Mr. Ricci. Mr. Ricci, as it turned out, was the silver-haired man who had opened the gates for her that Thursday. Tomas Ricci, 65 years old, had been in that house longer than Maya had been alive. Throughout her first week, he didn't ask her a single question, but 3 times Maya looked up while cleaning the second-floor corridor, and all 3 times she found him standing at the top of the stairs, his hands clasped behind his back, watching her. He didn't look away when their eyes met, and he didn't say anything. He simply watched long enough for her to understand that in this house, people didn't need to open their mouths to tell one another something. On the 9th day, Maya cleaned her way to the dark wooden door at the end of the west corridor and found it standing open a little over an inch. There was no one inside. She stood there with the cloth in her hand, counting the beats of her own heart, then kept walking as though nothing had happened, and she waited until 2 o'clock that morning to come back. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Maya walked barefoot along the second-floor corridor, with her phone screen turned off inside her apron pocket, and the dark wooden door was still standing open a little over an inch, exactly as it had been that afternoon. She pushed it with the tip of one finger. The room was dark, lit only by the streetlights filtering through the windows. She tried all 3 built-in filing cabinets. All 3 were locked. Then she turned toward the desk, pulled open the first drawer, and it slid out without a sound. Inside were neatly clipped stacks of papers, and in the right corner lay a blue-covered notebook. Maya went perfectly still for the length of one breath. She had seen that notebook for 20 years in her father's coat pocket. She reached for it. A light came on, not the ceiling light, only the desk lamp in the corner of the room, and the man who had switched it on was sitting in an armchair with his back to the door, which meant he had been there before she ever walked in. The man rose slowly, and Maya recognized him before he said a word, because there was only one person in that house whose name made every member of the staff lower their voice. Benedict Castellani didn't shout, didn't call security, didn't reach for his phone. He simply walked to the edge of the desk, looked down at the open drawer, then looked at her. "What are you doing with that drawer?" he asked. His voice was so ordinary that it frightened her more than any shout Maya had ever heard. "I'm cleaning the desk," she said. "I'm not allowed in here during the day, so I thought I'd do it now." He looked at her hands. No cloth, no spray bottle. "Where are your cleaning supplies?" "In the cabinet downstairs," she said. "I was going to get them afterward." Benedict nodded once. Not the nod of a man who believed her, but the nod of a man who had finished hearing an answer and had filed it somewhere for later use. He pushed the drawer shut with 2 fingers. "You're Kelly," he said. "Yes." "Sean's daughter." "Yes." He stayed silent long enough for Maya to imagine being fired that very night, to think about Maeve's tuition, to think about the journey back to Pilsen at 2 o'clock in the morning. Instead of lowering her head, she straightened her back. "What are you going to do to me?" she asked. That question made him look up. "What do you think I'm going to do?" "I don't know. People say a lot of things about you. People say a lot of things about everyone," Benedict said. He sat on the edge of the desk without moving a single step closer to her. "Your father worked for me for 9 years. He was the only person in this company who never made me ask for the same number twice." Maya felt her throat tighten, and she hated herself for it. "Then why did you let them say he took $1,200,000? Benedict didn't answer at once. It was the first question in the entire conversation that cost him a beat. "Because that's what the audit concluded," he said. "And you believed it." "I believed the report I was given," he said. "Those are 2 different things, Miss Kelly." In those 3 seconds, Maya almost told him everything. Almost told him that 6 weeks before her father died, he had called her and said he was dealing with something. But she remembered Vittoria's words about keeping people where they could be watched, and she kept her mouth shut. Benedict stood, switched off the desk lamp, and walked past her toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped. "Next time, just ask me," he said without turning around. "I answer faster than the drawer does." Then he left. No one came to fire her the next morning. No one mentioned what had happened that night. On Wednesday, Maya saw that the drawer had been locked, but the blue-covered notebook was still inside, because she caught sight of one corner of it when someone opened the drawer to take out some papers. He knew she had lied, and he had still left it there. Maya couldn't understand what that meant, and it would take her many months to understand. The person who pulled her out of that tangle of thoughts was about 34 years old, and appeared in the secondary kitchen one afternoon, carrying 2 cups of coffee, handing one to her as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "Nico Barone," he said. "I keep Benedict's books. My desk used to be your father's desk." Maya didn't take the coffee right away. You know who I am. Everyone in this house knows who you are, Nico said, and he smiled, a genuine smile, the kind that made a person feel at ease almost immediately. They just don't want to talk to you. Sit down. The coffee's going to get cold. Over the next 4 months, Nico was the only person in that house who called Maya by her first name instead of calling her the maid. He saved pieces of cake for her. He gave her rides to the station on rainy days. He asked how Maeve was doing in school, remembered the name of the university, and asked again every time he saw her. Once, very quietly, he told her that he didn't believe her father had taken that money, that Sean Kelly was the most decent man he had ever worked with. Maya had waited 3 years to hear someone say those words. She remembered them for a long time. Later, she would remember them in an entirely different way. In the 4th month, on a Tuesday night, Maya missed the last train, and Mr. Ricci told her she could sleep in one of the staff rooms on the ground floor. By 10 o'clock that night, the entire house had gone dark, and she couldn't sleep. She went down to the secondary kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and stood staring into it for a long time like someone searching for something that wasn't inside. Then she began to cook. She made soda bread the way her mother used to make it, and she simmered a pot of beef with potatoes, onions, and bone broth. Nothing more elaborate than that. It was the kind of food made by families who had to stretch a little over 2 pounds of meat far enough to feed 4 people. It was the kind of meal her mother cooked on the nights her father came home late, and her father was always late. Maya cooked because her hands needed something to do. She had been inside this house for 16 weeks and hadn't managed to open a single filing cabinet. Close to 11 o'clock, she heard the side door open. Benedict walked into the secondary kitchen with his coat draped over one arm, and he stopped in the doorway. He didn't ask what she was doing there at that hour. He didn't tell her to go to bed. He simply stood there, and Maya realized he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the pot. "I missed the train," she said. "Mr. Ricci said I could stay here tonight." Benedict nodded. His eyes still hadn't left the stove. "What's that?" he asked. "Beef stew. And soda bread. You probably don't know what soda bread is." "No," he said. "I don't." Maya took down a plate before she had time to wonder whether doing so violated some rule of etiquette in this house. Spooned out a serving, cut 2 slices of bread, and set them on the kitchen counter. "Try it. It'd be a shame to let it go cold." Benedict looked at the plate, then at her, and Maya had the distinct feeling that he was considering something far more serious than whether to eat a late-night meal. Then he hung his coat over the back of a chair, sat down, and ate. He finished the first plate without saying a word. "Is it good?" Maya asked. Benedict set down his spoon. "This bread is saltier than I expected." "That's the baking soda," she said. "Everyone says that the first time." He didn't answer. He tore off another piece of bread, and when he spoke to the plate rather than to her. "My mother used to cook," he said. Maya stood still by the sink, both hands still wet. "She cooked every dinner in this house until I was 12 years old. She wouldn't let anyone touch the kitchen, not even the staff. She said the kitchen was the only place in this house where she had complete authority." He paused. "Then, in October of that year, my father was shot outside St. Anthony Church on a Sunday morning after Mass. He was standing on the steps, and I was about 10 feet away from him." Maya said nothing. She had learned there were moments when the kindest sentence was the one left unspoken. "I was 12, Benedict said. "I remember very clearly that I didn't scream. I remember standing there and doing nothing. People said there was nothing a child could have done, and they were right, but that doesn't change the way I remember it. That night, when we came home, my mother went into the kitchen, stood there for about half an hour, then walked out and closed the door behind her. She never cooked another meal. From then on, this house hired chefs. For 26 years, no one in my family has cooked a meal for themselves." He looked down at the empty plate. "I'd forgotten this smell." Maya dried her hands on her apron. "Do you want some more?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes." She served him a second plate, set it down, then stepped back and stood on the other side of the kitchen counter, no closer than before. He ate more slowly this time. "Your father used to talk about food too," he said. "I don't remember what he said, but I remember he talked about it often." "He was talking about my mother," Maya said. "My mother died when I was 19. My father talked about her by talking about the things she used to cook. It was the only way he knew how." Benedict nodded slowly. "That's a good way. Better than silence," Maya said. He looked up at her, and in that moment Maya had the feeling she had just said something that touched a place she hadn't meant to touch. But he wasn't angry. He simply looked at her for another second, then lowered his eyes and continued eating. When he finished, he carried his own plate to the sink and set it down, something Maya was certain no one in that house had ever done before. He picked up his coat. At the door, he stopped. "Don't tell my mother about tonight," he said. "I won't. Not because she'd be angry with you." "Yes," Maya said. "I understand." But she didn't. Not completely. Not then. Benedict walked out. Maya washed the 2 plates, turned off the kitchen light, and stood there for a little while longer in the darkness, one hand still resting on the cold countertop. She had entered this house looking for a blue-covered notebook. She had never imagined there would come a night when she would stand in its kitchen and feel sorry for a man who carried the Castellani name. At the end of May, the Castellani family held a party, the kind of gathering that people in that house called a family dinner, even though there were more than 60 guests. Every member of the staff was put to work, and Maya was assigned to the drink service team in the great room. Vittoria gave her only one instruction before the guests arrived. You move among them, you pour, you leave. You don't answer anyone who asks you anything that isn't about a drink. Maya did exactly that for the first 2 hours. Then a woman of about 32 stopped her in the middle of the room, not by stepping into her path, but by standing exactly where she was and refusing to move when Maya needed to pass. "You're the new one, aren't you?" the woman said. "Camille Rossi. I practically grew up in this house alongside Mrs. Vittoria's son. I noticed new faces." "Yes," Maya said, and she started to move on. "Kelly," Camille said. "Right." Maya stopped. Around them, 3 or 4 people nearby had already turned their heads, and the conversation within about 10 feet began to fade in the way crowds always seem to quiet when they sensed something was about to happen. "Mrs. Vittoria really does have a sense of humor," Camille said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, hiring the daughter of a thief to scrub the floors her own father stole from. The entire room heard it. Maya stood still with the tray in her hands. She had imagined this moment from the first day she walked through those gates, and she had imagined it wrong, because in her version she stayed silent and walked away. "If my father took $1,200,000, she said in a normal voice, not one bit louder than Camille's, "do you really think I'd still be on my knees scrubbing the floor you're standing on?" No one laughed, but someone drew in a very quiet breath, and Camille blinked once. "I don't know where that money went," Maya continued. "I only know it didn't go into my house. Our house was sold 4 months after the funeral. If you're looking for $1,200,000, Miss Rossi, I suggest you don't look in my direction. I don't even have 1,200. She gave a very slight bow, exactly polite enough for someone serving drinks, and moved on. She passed 3 tables, set down the tray, and only when both her hands were empty did she realize they were trembling. She also realized, at that exact moment, that Benedict was standing at the far end of the great room with a glass of wine in his hand, and he had been there before Camille ever opened her mouth. He didn't step forward. He didn't say a word. He looked straight at Camille for about 2 seconds, long enough for her to turn away and begin speaking to the person beside her, and then he looked away too. The party ended close to midnight. Maya was stacking glasses in the back hallway when Benedict walked past and stopped. "You didn't need me to defend you," he said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, and Maya understood immediately that he thought he had just said something kind. She placed the last glass into the rack. "That's not the point," she said. He stopped. "What do you mean?" "I can take care of myself," Maya said. "I've been taking care of myself since I was 19. But everyone in that room just saw something, and what they saw wasn't that I gave a good answer. What they saw was you standing there and saying nothing. Tomorrow they won't repeat what I said. They'll repeat that the boss stood there and watched." Benedict didn't answer right away. "What did you want me to do?" he said. "Say 1 sentence. Just one. You pay 60 people who were in that room tonight. If you say 1 sentence, they'll remember it for 10 years. He looked at her for a long moment. "I don't say things I'm not certain of," he said. "Your father was named in a report I haven't reopened. If I had defended you in front of 60 people tonight, I would have been standing behind something I haven't verified. I don't do that. Not for anyone." Maya nodded slowly. "Then keep it that way," she said. "But you should know that silence is an answer too. It's just not the answer you want to take responsibility for." She lifted the rack of glasses and walked toward the secondary kitchen. And she didn't look back to see whether he was still standing there. Benedict remained where he was for a while longer. At the far end of the hallway, Tomas Ricci waited until the sound of Maya's footsteps had disappeared down the stairs before speaking, and it was the first time in 4 months that he had spoken to her. "Miss Kelly." Maya turned around. The old man didn't come any closer. He simply stood where he was, his hands clasped behind his back, in the same posture she had caught him in 3 times at the top of the stairs. "I've worked in this house for 42 years, he said. "I've watched many people walk through those gates with a question in their minds. You're looking for the truth in a house where truth is the most expensive thing there is, Miss Kelly. I hope you've figured out how much you can afford to pay." Then he bowed his head, very politely, and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, before Maya could ask him a single question. In the 10th month, on a Thursday night, the house stayed awake until dawn. Maya knew something was wrong by 9 o'clock that evening, when 3 cars left the gates at the same time, and Mr. Ricci stood in the foyer with a phone pressed to his ear for 40 minutes without moving from the spot. By 11, Nico passed through the secondary kitchen with his face drained white, and he didn't stop for coffee the way he always did. "What's going on?" Maya asked. Nico stopped for half a step. "Calumet Harbor," he said. "A deal went bad." Then he kept walking, and Maya didn't ask anything more, because in 10 months inside that house she had learned that people told her exactly the part they wanted her to hear. She learned the rest close to 1 o'clock in the morning, when 2 members of the staff were speaking in very low voices in the back hallway, and she happened to pass just as one of them said the names. 2 men, both worked for this family. One was named Marco, worked in logistics, and had a wife and a child. Maya had never met the other man. She stood at the foot of the stairs for a long time, thinking about how for 10 months she had kept telling herself that what happened to these people had nothing to do with her. Benedict didn't come home all night. Mr. Ricci said the boss had gone to deliver the news. Maya asked what news, and the old man only looked at her, and she understood. He hadn't sent anyone else. He had gone himself. He had knocked on Marco's wife's door at 2 o'clock in the morning and sat in her living room to say those words with his own mouth. Mr. Ricci added that this was the 4th time in 7 years, and the boss had never once sent someone else in his place. Close to 5 o'clock in the morning, Maya heard the side door open. She was in the secondary kitchen because she couldn't sleep. She heard footsteps passing by, uneven footsteps, then the sound of something made of glass touching a tabletop upstairs. She went up. The study door was wide open, the lights were off, and Benedict was sitting on the floor with his back against the edge of the desk, one leg stretched out, one hand still holding an empty glass. Maya had watched this man command a room full of people without ever raising his voice. She had never seen him sitting on the floor. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. "Go home," he said. His voice was rough and slow. "You shouldn't see this." Maya didn't move. "How much have you had to drink?" "Not enough," he said. "That's the problem. No amount is enough." She stepped inside and sat in the chair nearest the door, about 3 paces away from him, and she kept that distance between them. "Marco?" she said. Benedict closed his eyes. "You know, people talk in the hallways." He nodded very slowly. "His wife's name is Renata. She opened the door and saw me standing there, and she knew immediately, before I even opened my mouth. People always know immediately. I sat in her house for an hour and 10 minutes. The baby was asleep in the next room, and I had to speak softly. Do you understand? I sat there and had to lower my voice to tell a woman that her husband wasn't coming home because her child was sleeping." He opened his eyes and stared into the empty space in front of him. 18 months ago, I promised myself no one else would die because of the work I do. I counted every day, 542 days. It's over." Maya sat still. "You didn't kill them," she said. "I didn't keep them alive either," he said. "In my line of work, the only difference between those 2 things is who has to go knock on the door." He set the glass on the floor, and it tipped over, rolled once, then stopped. He didn't pick it up. "Do you know what the funniest part is?" he said. "My father died on the church steps, and I was standing about 10 feet away, and I swore that when I grew up I would do things differently. 26 years later, I'm sitting in someone else's living room at 2 o'clock in the morning saying the exact words someone once said to my mother. I didn't do anything differently. I only learned how to say those words more politely." Maya stood. She was going to get him some water, nothing more, and she had taken 2 steps toward the door. "Don't go." He didn't shout. He didn't stand up. He only said those 2 words. And in that moment his voice wasn't the voice of a man giving an order. It was the voice of a 12-year-old boy standing 10 feet from the church steps. Maya stopped. She stood there for a long time, long enough to understand that if she turned back, everything after that night would be different, and long enough to understand that she was still going to turn back. She walked into the room again. She sat down on the floor an arm's length from him, and she held out her hand. He took it. Neither of them knew when morning came. When Maya woke, the space beside her was empty. She heard water running in the bathroom at the end of the hallway, and she sat up, smoothed her hair, and for exactly 30 seconds she felt 2 things at once that she couldn't separate from each other. The first was that she didn't regret it. The second was that she understood with perfect clarity that in this house, a maid who walked out of the boss's study at 6 o'clock in the morning was no longer simply a maid, and had never become anything else either. He came back out 10 minutes later, dressed in a fresh shirt, and he didn't pretend nothing had happened. That was the first thing Maya noticed. And she noticed it carefully. "I remember about 70% of last night," he said. "The part I remember most clearly is telling you not to go." Maya rose from the floor. "I'm not apologizing for last night," Benedict said. "If I apologize for last night, then I'm saying you did something wrong, and you didn't. I'm apologizing for letting you see me like that. No one in this house has ever seen me like that. Not even my mother." "You don't know," Maya said. "Maybe that was the best thing you managed to do all night." He didn't answer. She continued before she lost her nerve. "I want 3 days off." He looked at her for a moment. "Are you planning not to come back?" "I'm coming back," Maya said. "But if I go downstairs this morning and pick up that cleaning cloth like I do every day, I won't know who I am in this house anymore. I need 3 days to figure that out." Benedict nodded once. 3 days, he said. "You'll still be paid." "Don't," she said. "That's not negotiable," he said. And it was the only sentence that entire morning that sounded like the voice of her employer. Maya went back to Pilsen. She didn't tell Maeve. She slept for 11 straight hours on the first day, and spent much of the other 2 days walking. She thought about the blue-covered notebook inside the locked drawer. She thought about what Tomas Ricci had told her in the hallway, that truth was the most expensive thing in that house, and that he hoped she had figured out how much she could afford to pay for it. She realized she had never calculated the cost. She also realized that those 3 days weren't really about deciding whether she would return, because she had known she was going back before she ever stepped onto the train. Those 3 days were for admitting to herself that there was a second reason. On the morning of the 4th day, she was at the gates by 7 o'clock. No one asked where she had been. That evening, Benedict sent for her in his office, not the study, but the smaller room on the 3rd floor where he worked during the day. 3 thick files were spread across the desk. "Sit down," he said. "I want you to hear something, and I haven't told anyone else." Maya sat. He turned one of the files toward her. 3 years, he said. "That's the deadline I gave myself. Within 3 years, everything carrying the Castellani name either has to be able to stand on legal paperwork, or it won't stand at all. Calumet Harbor, logistics, real estate on the south side, everything. I've converted 40% of it. I have 28 months left for the rest." Maya looked down at the file. It contained the registration documents for a logistics company, Castellani Holdings, figures, licenses, notarized signatures. "Can you do it?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. And that was the answer that made her believe him. "My father couldn't. He never even tried. He believed that what kept a family alive was the fear other people had of it. He died on the church steps with that belief still in his head." Benedict tapped one finger against the desk. "For 18 months, no one died because of the work I do. I counted the days. You know that ended Thursday." "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked. "Because I need to hear myself say it out loud once," he said. "Everyone in this house has a stake in what I do. My mother has one. Nico has one. The council has one. You're the only person who gains nothing if I succeed, and loses nothing if I fail." "You do lose something," Maya said. "If you fail, a few dozen more people end up knocking on one another's doors at 2 o'clock in the morning." Benedict looked at her. "You're right," he said. "I take back what I just said." Over the next 3 weeks, something existed between them that neither one named and both of them knew was there. She didn't go up to the 3rd floor every night. He didn't ask her to stay, but he began sending for her whenever a number didn't match, because she was the daughter of the man who had once kept the books, and she noticed things the outside accountants didn't. Once, she pointed to a column in a summary sheet and said that this was the way her father used to record things, that he always separated loading costs from storage costs, and Benedict remained silent for a long time after she said it. She also began asking him questions she wouldn't have dared ask 10 months earlier, about the harbor, about the council, about the names the household staff only ever mentioned in half-finished sentences. He answered every one of them, briefly and without evasion. He kept the promise he had made to her that first night in the study, that he answered faster than the drawer did. During the 3 days Maya spent away in Pilsen, she thought they were nothing more than a quiet space in which to put her thoughts back in order. It turned out those 3 days were exactly enough time for someone else to finish setting the trap. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon for a reason so absurdly ordinary that Maya could barely believe it. The study was due for its monthly deep cleaning. Once every month, the 3 built-in filing cabinets were unlocked, so the dust could be cleared out. And that month, Mr. Ricci handed the keys to her. He held them out without saying a word, looked at her for exactly 1 second longer than necessary, then went downstairs. Maya stood in front of the 3 cabinets, with the ring of keys in her hand, and understood that she had about 40 minutes. She truly cleaned them, one drawer at a time, in the proper order, and she read as she worked. The fourth drawer of the third cabinet contained the archived files from the year her father died. She found it in the 9th folder. A transfer order, the original paper document, with a handwritten signature in the lower right corner, and that signature was Sean Kelly's. Maya knew every curve and hook of her father's signature. Beside it was a date, clearly stamped, April 17th. Maya sank down onto the floor with the paper in her hand. On April 17th of that year, her father had been lying in the cardiac ward at Mercy Hospital. He had been admitted on the evening of the 15th and discharged on the afternoon of the 19th. She remembered because she was the one who signed his admission papers. She remembered because she had slept 3 nights in a plastic chair beside his bed. He hadn't left that bed once in 4 days. And he hadn't signed a single document because an intravenous line was inserted into his right hand. Someone had forged her father's signature. Maya went through the rest of the file. There was only that one sheet. No duplicate, no photocopy, and no internal electronic record, because internal transfer orders from that period had been stored purely on paper before the digitization project. In this house, she was holding the only physical original in existence. She folded it, slipped it inside her clothes, locked all 3 cabinets, and carried the keys downstairs to Mr. Ricci with both hands pressed tightly together because that was the only way she could stop them from shaking. She didn't sleep that night. She thought about taking the paper straight upstairs to Benedict's 3rd-floor office, but she remembered what he had said, that he didn't stand behind anything he hadn't verified, and there would be problems no matter how he tried to verify a document his maid had personally taken from one of his filing cabinets. She needed someone inside the machinery, someone who knew where that money had moved, someone who could reopen the records without anyone asking why. The next morning, she waited for Nico in the parking area. "I found something," she said. Nico looked at her face, then opened the car door and let her sit inside. He read the paper in exactly 30 seconds, and Maya watched the color leave his face. "April 17th, he said. "He was in the hospital," Maya said, "from the 15th through the 19th. I have the discharge papers at home." Nico closed his eyes, opened them again, then swore very quietly. "I've been sitting in his chair for 3 years. Knowing something about this never made sense," he said. "But I never had anything in my hands. Is this the original? The only physical copy in the estate's archives?" Maya said. "I checked. There are no duplicate records in the house." He looked at her. "Giving this to me means you're putting your whole life in my hands, Maya. You know that." "I know," she said. "Why me?" "Because you're the only person in that house who told me my father didn't take that money," she said. "You told me that when there was nothing in it for you." Nico was silent for a moment. Then he folded the paper very carefully, slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat, and placed his hands on the steering wheel. "Let me handle it," he said. "I can get into the old payment system. I can trace the transfer back to the receiving account. Give me 2 weeks. Don't tell anyone, not even Benedict, especially Benedict." "Why especially him?" Maya asked. "Because if he finds out before I have enough evidence, he'll go straight to whoever he suspects," Nico said. "And that person will have time to clean everything up. Do you want your father's name cleared? Or do you want to watch Benedict get angry for 2 days and then have nothing to show for it?" Maya nodded. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," Nico said, and he gave her that smile. "Thank me when it's done." Maya stepped out of the car with the first real sense of relief she had felt in 3 years. She had found proof. She had given it to the right person. On the 2nd floor of the house, behind a window frame, Camille Rossi stood watching the 2 of them talk in the parking area for 8 minutes. But Nico wasn't what caught Camille's attention. What had caught her attention was what had happened the night before in the dining room, when Benedict had looked up and followed Maya with his eyes as she carried a tray out of the room. Camille had sat beside that man for 6 years and had never once been looked at that way. Maya had chosen the wrong person to trust, and it would take her 3 years to discover that. That night, Nico Barone didn't go home. He drove up to River North and walked into a restaurant on the 2nd floor, where a woman was already waiting at the table farthest inside. Camille Rossi didn't look up when he pulled out the chair. "You're 15 minutes late," she said. "I had something to take care of." Nico draped his coat over the back of the chair and sat down. He didn't order anything. "What happened?" He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, took out the paper, and placed it on the table, folded into quarters, without opening it. Camille looked at it. "What's this?" "A transfer order dated April 17th, Nico said. Camille didn't move for exactly 3 seconds. Then she reached for it, unfolded the paper, read it, and folded it again. "He was in the hospital that day," she said. "In the hospital. The girl found it." In the filing cabinet in the study. Ricci gave her the keys this month. She gave it to you. Nico nodded. Told me not to tell anyone. Told me it was the original, the only copy, and that she'd checked. Camille placed the paper on the table and pushed it back toward him with one finger. Then you know what you have to do. Nico didn't pick it up immediately. 3 years ago, I took $1,200,000, he said. And I thought it was over. You think a lot of things are over, Camille said. You thought, mister. Kelly wouldn't find out. He did. He came to see me before he told Benedict, Nico said. He gave me 2 weeks to turn myself in. He told me everyone gets one chance to choose differently. He stopped. Then he went into the hospital. And you used those exact 2 weeks, Camille said. Nico didn't answer. Camille watched him for a long time. You didn't kill him, she said. His car hit the median because of his heart. That's God's business, not yours. All you did was sign his name on a piece of paper once he could no longer speak for himself. I know what I did, Nico said. Then don't sit there looking repentant for me. She took a sip of water. If that paper leaves your hands, you're not going to prison, Nico. Benedict won't take you to court. You know what he does to people who steal from the family and blame it on a dead man. Nico picked up the paper. He held it for a long time. Then he flicked a lighter beneath the table, touched the flame to one corner, and dropped the burning sheet into the ceramic ashtray in the center of the table. They both sat there watching until it burned away completely. Neither of them spoke until nothing remained but ash. Now, Camille said, let's talk about the girl. Nico looked up. She doesn't have anything anymore. She has a brain, Camille said. She remembers dates. She remembers which drawer held which stack of files. She'll look again, and next time she won't hand it to you. What do you want? I want her out of that house, Camille said. Not fired because she left dust on a floor. I want her gone in a way that makes no one in that house dare say her name again. Nico stayed silent long enough for Camille to know he would do it. She continued. 6 years ago, I was supposed to become his wife. My father and Mrs. Vittoria had already settled everything. He said no, right there at the dinner table, without offering a single explanation. I sat there. She slowly turned the glass in her hand. Last week, I watched him follow that maid with his eyes when she carried a tray out of the dining room. 6 years, Nico. He has never once looked at me that way. Nico exhaled. You're doing all of this because of that. You're doing this because of your neck, Camille said. I'm doing it for my reasons. Both reasons lead to the same place, so don't waste your time sorting them into categories. Then she took a phone from her bag, still wrapped in factory plastic, placed it on the table, and pushed it toward him. This is registered in her name, she said. Last month, using her exact social security number. Nico looked at the phone. Who are you planning to message? Declan Rourke's people, Camille said. 3 messages, 4 days apart. Vague enough that no one can prove they're fake, but clear enough that anyone reading them will understand someone inside the house is talking to outsiders. You know who on Rourke's side will answer. Nico nodded slowly. Yes, he said. I know who will answer. What else? Photographs, Camille said. She went down to Bridgeport last Friday afternoon, went into a place on the corner of 35th Street, and sat there for 40 minutes with a man. She was meeting a lawyer. Probably, Camille said. But people don't wear signs in photographs telling you what they do for a living. Nico picked up the phone and slipped it into his pocket. How long? Camille glanced at her watch. 3 weeks, she said. In 3 weeks, Calumet Harbor has a major shipment coming through. If something happens to that shipment, everything sitting on his desk will fall into place on its own, and he won't need anyone to explain a thing. Nico stood and reached for his coat. Do you ever think about stopping? He asked. Camille pushed the ashtray full of gray dust into the center of the table. Yes, she said, about 4 minutes ago. You burned it in front of me. 3 weeks passed, and Maya didn't realize what they were moving toward. She only noticed the small things. The gray car parked at the end of her street in Pilsen 3 mornings in a row, then disappeared, then came back the following Monday. The same man rode the train with her twice in 1 week, in the same car, at the same time, and he never sat down. She told herself it was the city, that the city had 8 million people, and everyone went to work at the same hour she did. She asked Nico whether he had found anything yet. He said he was tracing it, that the old payment system was slower than he had expected, that she just needed to be a little more patient. He still saved a piece of cake for her. He still asked how Maeve was doing in school. Then came Friday night of the 3rd week. Maya was in the secondary kitchen close to 10 o'clock when the telephone in the foyer rang, and she knew it was something serious because Mr. Ricci didn't answer immediately. He stood there and let it ring through an entire cycle before picking it up. He listened for about 20 seconds. He didn't say a single word. Then he put the phone down, went straight upstairs to the 3rd floor, and Maya heard the office door close. Over the next 4 hours, 11 cars came and went through the gates. By 2 o'clock in the morning, she caught 2 words from the back hallway, Calumet, and a number, 2. This time Maya didn't ask anyone anything. She sat on the bottom step of the service staircase and thought about Renata, the woman she had never met, and about how somewhere in this city tonight there were 2 more doors that someone would soon have to knock on. She didn't know what kind of shipment it had been. She didn't know who had stopped it. She only knew that the thing Benedict had counted for 542 days, then lost, then begun counting again from the beginning, had now fallen back to 0 once more. The next morning, an unstamped envelope was delivered to the gates. Mr. Ritchie received it, carried it upstairs to the 3rd floor, and placed it on the desk in front of Benedict. Inside were 11 pages. The first 3 were printouts of messages from a prepaid number registered 1 month earlier using Maya Kelly's social security number, sent to a number Castellani Security had been tracking for 2 years, and knew with certainty belonged to one of Declan Rourke's men. The next 4 pages were photographs taken from across the street, showing Maya walking out of a place on the corner of 35th Street, turning back to say something to a man, the man handing her an envelope. The final 4 pages showed the schedule for the Calumet shipment on Friday night, with notes marking the time of the leak, matching down to the hour with the date of the 3rd message. And on the final page were 2 names, 2 men who hadn't gone home that night. Benedict read all 11 pages. Then he went back and read them again from the beginning. Mr. Ritchie stood in the doorway the entire time, and was neither asked to leave nor asked to stay. Who sent this? Benedict asked. No name, Mr. Ritchie said. No stamp. Someone left it in the mailbox outside the gates during the night. Benedict closed the file and rested one hand on top of it. He said nothing else. Mr. Ritchie waited a little longer, then withdrew, and before closing the door, he saw that his employer was still sitting in exactly the same position, one hand resting on the papers, his eyes fixed on empty space. Over the next 10 days, Maya felt the house change, though she couldn't point to exactly what had changed. He still greeted her when they passed each other. He still sent for her when he needed a number checked, but 3 times in a row he canceled at the last moment. He came home later. 2 nights he didn't come home at all. The door to the 3rd floor office was closed more often than it was open, and the gray car in Pilsen was now parked there every day. On the 11th day, Maya stopped him at the foot of the stairs. Can I ask you something? Benedict stopped. Ask. Did I do something wrong? He answered too quickly. No. That was when Maya began to feel afraid. Not because of the answer, but because of how fast it came. In 11 months inside that house, she had learned that this man weighed even the simplest sentences before he spoke them. He had never answered her before giving himself time to think. You answer faster than the drawer, she said, repeating his own words back to him. And she tried to smile, but the smile never quite arrived. Benedict looked at her. In those 2 seconds, she saw something in his face that she would think about many times later. Something she couldn't read then. If something were wrong, you'd tell me, wouldn't you? She asked. Yes, he said. Then he went upstairs. That night, Maya lay in the staff room on the ground floor and comforted herself with the logic of an innocent person, that she hadn't done anything wrong, that whatever this was would eventually be brought to her and questioned, that he had promised he would answer her. 2 floors above her, Benedict sat in front of the 11-page file he had now read for the 9th time. He still didn't know who had written the story sitting on his desk. The person who came to get her wasn't Benedict. At 9 o'clock Wednesday night, Mr. Ritchie came down to the secondary kitchen and said Mrs. Castellani wanted to see her in the main study, and he said it in the voice of a man delivering news that someone in the family had died. Maya took off her apron. Miss Kelly, Mr. Ritchie said as she passed him. Keep it short. The longer you talk, the worse it gets. There were 3 people in the study. Vittoria sat at the head of the table. Benedict stood by the window with his back turned. Camille Rossi sat in a chair off to one side, and her presence was the first thing Maya knew was wrong. On the tabletop, the file had been opened and spread into 3 rows. Sit down, Vittoria said. Maya didn't sit. Say what you need to say. Vittoria turned the first row of papers toward her. What is this? Maya bent down and read the 3 pages of messages. For about 4 seconds, she didn't understand what she was looking at, and then she did, and the floor seemed to tilt beneath her. I don't have this phone number, she said. It's registered under your social security number. I didn't register it. Vittoria pushed the 2nd row toward her. And this, photographs of you in Bridgeport. That's a lawyer, Maya said. His name is Halloran. His office is on 35th Street. I went there to ask about my father's case. You can call him right now. We already had someone check, Camille said smoothly. His receptionist confirmed you walked out without ever retaining him or opening a case. Because I never signed an agreement with him, Maya said. I couldn't afford the retainer. I sat with him for 40 minutes just to ask questions. The envelope he gave me was a fee estimate. Vittoria pushed the third row toward her more slowly, and she said nothing at all, because the final page held only 2 names. Maya stared at those 2 names for a long time. You think I did this? She said. I think, Vittoria said, that you came into this house with a purpose you hid from us for 11 months. I think you searched through the records in the study at night, at least once, and that I know for certain. I think you took the filing cabinet keys last month. Did you do those things, Miss Kelly? Yes, Maya said. It was the most truthful answer she gave all evening, and she watched it fall onto the table like a stone. I did those things, she continued, because I was looking for proof that my father didn't steal money from this family. I found it 3 weeks ago. A transfer order signed on April 17th. The day he was lying in the cardiac ward at Mercy Hospital and couldn't even hold a pen. Vittoria was silent for 1 beat. Where is that paper? Maya opened her mouth, and at that exact moment, she remembered what Nico had told her. Not to tell anyone, especially Benedict. But she was standing there now, and she had nothing else. I gave it to someone in this house so they could trace the money, she said. Who? I can't say. I promised. Camille gave a very quiet laugh. Vittoria didn't. She only planted both hands on the tabletop. You're telling me that the only evidence that clears you is something you handed to a person you refused to name, Vittoria said. Yes, Maya said. Do you hear how that sounds? I do, Maya said. I know everything I just said is true. And I know every word of it sounds like a lie. That's the damnable part of it. She turned toward the window. Benedict was still standing with his back to her. He hadn't said a single word since she entered the room. You told me to ask you, Maya said. You told me you answered faster than the drawer. I'm asking you now. Do you believe me? The entire room went silent. 4 seconds. Then Benedict turned around. He didn't look at her. He looked down at the table, at the last page, at the 2 names lying there. And Maya watched something close in his face, the way a door closes from the other side. He had learned when he was 12 years old that someone could sit down and share a meal with you and still be the person who sold you out. Get her out of my house. That was all he said. Maya didn't scream. She didn't beg. She stood straight and looked at him for another 2 seconds, then said, All right, and she was the one who turned away first. 2 security men followed her down to the ground floor. She collected her purse from the staff room. She left her apron folded neatly on the bed. In the foyer, Mr. Ricci stood close to the wall, and he couldn't bring himself to look at her, and Maya didn't blame him. Vittoria waited for her at the gates. She held out a check. This is 9 months of wages, she said. Take it, and don't come back here again, Miss Kelly. Don't call, don't write. If you do exactly that, then what happened tonight ends tonight. Maya took the check. She looked at the number printed on it. Then she tore it in half, tore it again into quarters, and let the pieces fall onto the pavement in front of Vittoria's shoes. You can't buy my father's name with your money, she said, and you can't buy mine either. Then she walked out through the gates close to midnight, with no one driving her, without looking back, and she walked a little over a mile to the nearest train station before she finally allowed herself to cry. It was the last time Maya Kelly ever did something whose price she could still pay alone. 10 days later, Maya sat in a community clinic on 18th Street because she had thrown up 3 mornings in a row and thought it was her stomach. The nurse ran a test, then sat down in the chair across from her instead of remaining standing. And Maya understood before the woman even opened her mouth. About 6 weeks, she said. Would you like to talk to someone? Maya shook her head. She remained in the waiting room for another 40 minutes after all the paperwork was finished, doing the calculation every woman does, quickly and before she can stop herself. 6 weeks. The night in the study, the night he had said don't go, she took out her phone. She opened her contacts. Her finger stopped on his name and stayed there for a long time, long enough for the screen to go dark once and for her to have to touch it awake again. She thought about what he would say. For one very brief and very human moment, she thought that if he knew, perhaps everything could be different. Then she remembered those 4 seconds in the study. She remembered him turning around and looking not at her, but down at the paper. She remembered the only sentence he had spoken, and she remembered that throughout that entire evening, he hadn't asked her a single question. Not one. Not even the easiest one. This child would grow up, and one day would ask its mother what kind of man its father had been, and Maya knew exactly what truthful answer she would have to give if she made that call now. Your father was a man who believed a piece of paper before he believed your mother. She turned off the phone. "I won't raise a child in a house that convicted its mother before asking her a single question," she said, and she said it out loud, and there was no one in that waiting room that day who heard her. The next problem was very simple and very difficult. The place she was renting was barely large enough for one person, and the next month's rent was due in 11 days. She had quit her job at the diner when she started working in Winnetka. She had no check to cash. The next morning, she walked down the street and went from one storefront to the next, asking whether anyone needed help. The 8th place was a small bakery that had stood on that corner longer than Maya had been alive. The owner, a woman of about 70 named Ruth Feldman, was lifting a tray from the oven when Maya walked in. "Do you know how to bake?" Ruth asked. "I know some things," Maya said. "Soda bread, cookies, my mother taught me." 4 o'clock in the morning, Ruth said. 6 days a week. I pay weekly." "All right," Maya said. Ruth looked at her a little longer than necessary for an interview that had lasted only 30 seconds. "Where are you staying?" Maya was about to give a simple answer and be done with it. Then she heard herself tell the truth. "I have to move out in 11 days, and I don't know where I'm going yet." Ruth set the tray down, wiped her hands, and pulled a ring of keys from her apron pocket. "There are 2 rooms upstairs," she said. "No elevator. Hot water only works in the mornings." Maya looked at the keys. "You're not going to ask me why?" "No," Ruth said. "Everyone needs a place where the world can't find them for a little while. Stay as long as you need." She placed the keys in Maya's hand and turned back toward the oven, and that was the entire conversation. Maya stood in the middle of the bakery with the keys in her hand and couldn't manage a proper thank you, because in the past 3 years no one had given her anything without attaching a question to it. She moved upstairs on Sunday. She began waking at 3:45 in the morning. She kneaded dough, watched the ovens, learned the names of the regular customers, and by the 3rd week Ruth trusted her to make the morning batch on her own. In the evenings, Maya enrolled in an online accounting course through the community college and studied from 8 until 11 because she had seen enough financial statements in Winnetka to understand that the only thing that kept people from fooling you with numbers was knowing how the numbers worked yourself. She called Maeve in the 4th week. She told her everything. She left nothing out, including the part she knew her sister would ask about 3 times in a row. Maeve was silent for almost a minute. Then she said, "I'm taking a semester off." "No," Maya said. "I'm not asking you," Maeve said. "I'm telling you. You're planning to get up at 4 in the morning while your stomach gets bigger and bigger and study until 11 every night, alone, in a building with no elevator. I'll go back next semester." "I don't need anyone feeling sorry for me," Maya said. "This isn't pity," Maeve said. "My last name is Kelly too." Maeve arrived on a Saturday afternoon with 2 suitcases and a box of cookies she had burned. She found a night shift at a pharmacy 4 blocks away and argued with her sister once a week about Maya spending too much time on her feet. In the 3rd month, when Maya had to leave the top button of her apron undone for it to fit, she stood in front of the mirror in the upstairs room and told herself something very quietly, that she wouldn't need anyone to come save her. She had already gotten herself back on her feet. She didn't know that a few miles away, someone had begun counting the days one by one. In Winnetka, no one mentioned the name Kelly anymore. A replacement housekeeper was hired within 4 days. The room on the ground floor was cleared out, and the apron left neatly folded on the bed was taken away, washed, and put into the communal linen closet. Benedict didn't lose his temper with anyone. Mr. Ricci had prepared himself for a week of storms, but that week never came. His employer still woke at the same hour, still held meetings, still signed papers. Over the next 4 months, he moved another 11% of the family's assets onto legitimate legal footing, more than he had managed in any previous quarter, and no one on the council understood why he had suddenly become so urgent about it. But Mr. Ricci noticed one thing. In the security room, the recording from that night was still sitting untouched in the system. Under a rule Benedict himself had established 7 years earlier, every recording was supposed to be deleted after 30 days. That night's footage had remained there for 121 days, frozen on its final image, a woman walking out through the gates close to midnight without looking back. No one dared delete it because no one had been ordered to. Mr. Ricci looked at that file 3 times over the course of 3 weeks, and then he began doing something else. He reopened the 11-page dossier. He wasn't a man who understood technology particularly well, but he was a man who had walked through that house for 42 years, and he remembered who stood where and when, and what he noticed had nothing to do with technology. It was in the work schedule. The second message had been sent at 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. 3 o'clock Tuesday afternoon was the scheduled deep cleaning of the 3rd floor. Mr. Ricci pulled up the security footage from that day, and he sat through all 4 hours of it, And during those 4 hours, Maya Kelly was never out of frame for more than 4 consecutive minutes and never touched a phone once, because household staff were required to leave their phones inside locked cabinets on the ground floor under Mrs. Vittoria's rules. He watched it a second time to make certain. Then he printed the work schedule for the entire month and compared it against the 3 dates on which the messages had been sent. All 3 fell during hours when she was visible on camera. That night, he went upstairs to the 3rd floor. "I want to tell you something," he said. Benedict didn't look up from the file in front of him. "Go ahead. You've never let someone do something like that and simply walk out through the gates, Mr. Ricci said. "I've been in this house 42 years. I know what happens to people who sell information to the Rourke family. You let her walk out of those gates at midnight, carrying nothing but a purse." Benedict set down his pen. "What are you trying to say, Mr. Ricci?" "I'm saying that some part of you didn't believe that file from the very first night," the old man said, "and you were afraid to look at that part of yourself. So you chose to throw her out, instead of doing one of the 2 things a decent man should have chosen to do." The room stayed silent for a long time. "Leave," Benedict said. Mr. Ricci bowed his head and walked out, but he didn't stop. Over the next 2 months, he spent his own money hiring someone from outside the family, not one of their people, but a man who specialized in analyzing phone data and tracing financial movements, and he gave him 3 things: the printed messages, the housekeeper's work schedule, and the prepaid phone number. He told no one what he was doing, not even Benedict, especially Benedict. That man believed only what could be placed on a table in front of him, and Mr. Ricci intended to place something on that table that couldn't be argued with. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, something else was happening that no one in the Winnetka house knew about. Dr. Elias Vance, 58 years old, had been on the Castellani family's payroll for 14 years as their private physician, and twice a month he volunteered at the community clinic on 18th Street, because doing so was a condition of keeping his medical license after an old incident he never spoke about. One Wednesday morning, he picked up the file for his next patient and read the name Maya Kelly. He had seen this woman pouring water in the Castellani dining room at least 4 times. He walked into the examination room, examined her normally, took notes normally, and said goodbye to her normally. That afternoon, he made a phone call. He didn't call Benedict. He called the person who had been paying him for 14 years. Vittoria Castellani listened to everything without interrupting once, and when he finished, she asked only 2 questions. "How many weeks? And has she told anyone yet?" 6 weeks, he said. "And no," the record says, "no relative accompanied her." Vittoria was silent for about 5 seconds. Then she said, "Dr. Vance, from now until I tell you otherwise, that name does not exist in any conversation you have with anyone. Do you understand?" He understood. The money was transferred the following afternoon, and it was 3 times the amount he normally received each month. The grandmother knew 79 days before the father did, and she used every single one of them. The first time Vittoria came was on a Thursday afternoon, when Maya had just entered her 2nd month. The black car parked at an angle in front of the bakery, forcing people to walk around it, and Vittoria stepped inside just as Maya was arranging loaves in the display case. Ruth looked up, then looked at Maya, and Maya quietly said it was all right. The 2 women sat at the small table beside the window. Vittoria didn't waste time. $500,000, she said. 1 payment, tax-free, with no other condition except one. After the baby is born, the child comes to Winnetka. You keep every dollar, and you can go anywhere you want in this country. Maya placed a hand over her stomach almost without thinking, not as an act of defiance, but because that was where her hand had naturally rested for the past several weeks. "You think I'd sell my child for money? I think you're 26 years old, baking bread for wages, living upstairs in someone else's building, and your father's hospital debt is still unpaid," Vittoria said. "I didn't come here to insult you. I came to give you a number you couldn't earn in 20 years. Maya stood. "You can leave now. Think about it." "I don't need to think about it," Maya said. "Please get out of this bakery." Vittoria rose, adjusted her sleeve, and showed no anger at all, which was the thing that frightened Maya most. "You'll think about it," she said. "Everyone does." The second time was 5 weeks later, when Maya had entered her 3rd month, and this time Vittoria didn't come alone. A lawyer carrying a leather briefcase accompanied her, and he spread a set of documents across the table that was thicker than Maya had expected. "This is a prenatal agreement," the lawyer said. "You can read it carefully, or I can summarize it for you." "I'll read it," Maya said. She read for 20 minutes, every single line, because several months of studying accounting at night had taught her that the most dangerous part of any contract was always the part someone advised you to skip. Every blank had already been filled in. Her name, her due date, her social security number, the payment divided into 3 installments, a confidentiality clause, with a penalty of $200,000 for violating it. On the final page, at the bottom, the signature of a witness was already there, an unfamiliar name, with the date left blank. Only one space was missing. Hers. Maya closed the documents. "Are you giving this to me as a lawyer?" she asked. "Yes." "Then answer one question as a lawyer. Would this hold up in court?" He hesitated for exactly half a second, and that half second was the answer. "It demonstrates the intentions of the parties," he said. "That's not what I asked," Maya said. Vittoria cut in. "Miss Kelly, you're calculating as though you have plenty of time. You'll be out of work for at least 6 weeks when you give birth. Your sister has already taken a semester off because of you." She mentioned Maeve lightly, almost casually, and that was when Maya understood that this woman had been having someone investigate her family. Maya pushed the documents back across the table. "Mrs. Castellani," she said, "I have a question, and I'm asking it sincerely, not to argue with you. Why do you want this baby but not me? If you believe I sold information to the Rourke family, if you believe I'm that kind of person, then why would you want to raise the child of someone like that? Aren't you afraid the baby might turn out like me?" Vittoria didn't answer. She looked at Maya for a long time, and for one brief moment, something passed quickly across her face. Something that wasn't contempt, wasn't calculation. Something Maya couldn't read. Then Vittoria stood and went back to the car. The lawyer gathered up the papers and followed her. For that entire afternoon, it was the only question Vittoria didn't answer. The third time came 4 weeks later, when Maya entered her 4th month. Maeve was the first to see her. She was standing in the upstairs kitchen when she glanced through the window and said, "Maya, that car is back." Maya stepped to the window. The black car was parked along the curb across the street. There was no lawyer. No driver standing outside waiting the way there had been the previous 2 times. Vittoria Castellani stepped out alone, carrying a thin folder in one hand, and stood on the sidewalk for about 10 seconds looking up at the 2nd-floor window. Maya instinctively stepped back half a pace, then forced herself to remain where she was. "Should I lock the door?" Maeve said. "No," Maya said. "Maya." "No," Maya said again. "If I lock the door today, she'll come back next month, and the month after that. This has to end somewhere, and it ends today. Go downstairs and stay with Ruth. I'm not going anywhere." "Maeve," Maya said, and something in her voice made her sister fall silent. "Go downstairs." Maeve went. Below them, the side door of the building opened and closed. Then came the sound of footsteps on the wooden stairs, slow and even, one step at a time. A 63-year-old woman climbing 2 flights in a building without an elevator, and never once stopping to rest. Maya stood in the middle of the room with one hand resting on her stomach, listening as those footsteps came closer. That same afternoon in Winnetka, Tomas Ricci placed a thin file on the 3rd-floor desk and remained standing. "What is this?" Benedict asked. "Start on page 4, mister," Ricci said. Benedict turned to page 4. There was a trail of money. $2,000 paid to a man who specialized in manipulating photographs and data, routed through an intermediary account, and that account had received money from a personal account in Camille Rossi's name. Page 6 contained the 3 messages, matched against Maya's work schedule and the security footage from the days they were sent. Page 8 traced the prepaid phone to a cash purchase in Cicero, and 30 minutes before that transaction, a camera at the store next door had captured the license plate of Nico Barone's car. Page 11 contained a blurred copy of the transfer order dated April 17th, 3 years earlier, recovered from the bank's archived records, along with an authorization report proving that the only person who could have created the order that day, other than Sean Kelly, was the man who shared his office. Benedict read every page, slowly, skipping nothing. "How long have you known?" he asked. "I started suspecting it the night I spoke to you in this room, mister," Ricci said. "I've had enough evidence for 11 days. I needed to be certain because I knew what you would do with it." Benedict stood and reached for his coat. "There's one more thing, mister," Ricci said. Benedict stopped. "She's pregnant," the old man said. 4 months. You should know before you go there." Benedict didn't ask whose child it was. He did the calculation any man would do. Once. Very quickly. And he didn't need to ask anything else. He walked out the door without saying a word to anyone. He drove through the city without touching the brakes, tires screeching against the asphalt of Pilsen, taking the stairs 2 at a time until his shoulder hit the latch of the apartment door. He crossed the room in 3 strides. He reached out and removed his mother's fingers from Maya's wrist, not violently, but firmly, and it was the first time in 38 years that he had ever touched her with force. The pen fell to the floor. Vittoria stepped back half a pace and looked at her son as though a stranger had wandered into the wrong house. "What are you doing in the home of the woman carrying your grandchild?" Benedict said. She didn't lower her voice. "I'm saving that baby." "Saving it from what?" "From this," Vittoria said. "From 2 flights of stairs with no elevator. From growing up with nothing. You stand there and think I'm the villain. I'm the only person in this whole situation willing to do the dirty part." Benedict bent down and picked up the documents from the table. He turned to the final page, where the witness's signature was already in place, and one space remained blank. "This paper isn't worth the ink printed on it," he said. "In Illinois, no mother can sign something like this before the baby is born, and after the birth, she still has to wait 72 hours. You brought a stack of papers here to frighten a woman who doesn't know the law. No judge in this state would look at it for more than 5 seconds. Vittoria didn't blink. 1985, she said. Benedict stopped. "What?" 1985, she repeated, more slowly. "That was the year I was 21. Back then, a piece of paper like this was worth a great deal." The entire room went silent. Maya, standing against the wall, looked from one of them to the other and understood nothing. Benedict stared at his mother for another 3 seconds. Then he tore the paper in half, tore it again into quarters, and placed the rest of the documents back on the table. "Go back to your car," he said. "You don't get to decide this." "You don't understand," Vittoria said. "You don't understand anything. Then someday you can explain it to me. Not today." She looked at Maya one last time, and there was something in that look unlike anything she had given her during the previous 3 visits. Then she walked down the stairs, 1 step at a time, slow and steady, exactly as she had climbed them. 2 people remained in the room. Benedict didn't move closer. He stayed exactly where he was. "Tomas Ricci gave me the evidence today," he said. "It was Nico and Camille. Nico took $1,200,000 3 years ago and signed your father's name on the transfer order while your father was in the hospital. The 11-page file was something the 2 of them manufactured." Maya had imagined this moment many times, and in every version she had felt relief. Now she only felt tired. "I stayed silent," Benedict said. "I've been standing here trying to find a way to say that makes it way less, and there isn't one. There is no version of that night in which I didn't betray you." "Do you know what the worst part is?" Maya said. "It isn't that you believed them. They built that file so anyone would believe it. The worst part is that you didn't ask me a single question. You had 4 seconds, and you chose to look down at a piece of paper." "I know," he said. "Don't tell me you know." "I know," he said again, and he didn't offer a single word in his own defense. Maya was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I don't forgive you today, and I'm not promising that someday I will." "All right," he said, "but this baby has a father, and I won't take that away from my child just because I'm angry. You're allowed to be present. That's all. You don't make decisions about me. You don't pay for me. You don't arrange my life. You are present." "All right," Benedict said. "I'll take that." Benedict returned to Winnetka close to midnight, and Mr. Ricci was still waiting in the foyer. "My mother said a year," Benedict said. 1985. "Do you know what happened that year?" Mr. Ricci stood perfectly still for a long time. Then he said, "I thought I would take this story to my grave." He walked into the small room beside the kitchen and sat down before he began, because 42 years of standing inside that house had taught him that some stories couldn't be told while standing. "Your mother wasn't born into this family," he said. "She came here when she was 21, working as a seamstress for your grandmother. She altered dresses, hemmed trousers, replaced buttons. I was 23 then." Benedict didn't sit. "Keep going. She became pregnant by your father, Mr. Ricci said, near the end of 1984. Your grandmother found out during the 5th month. She didn't throw your mother out onto the street. She arranged a rented room on the 2nd floor on the west side, had food delivered to her, and waited until the baby was born." Mr. Ricci looked down at his hands. "The baby was a girl. 3 days later, your grandmother went to that room with a lawyer and a set of papers. I was the one driving that day. I sat downstairs on the street for an hour and 40 minutes. When they came back down, the lawyer was carrying the papers. Your grandmother was carrying the baby, and your mother didn't come down." Benedict said nothing. "She signed," Mr. Ricci said. "She was 21 years old, with no money and no family in this country, and they told her that if she didn't sign, no one would guarantee anything for her anymore. Back then, that paper could hold up in court. Today it couldn't, but she doesn't know that it couldn't today. All she knows is 1985. Your father came home 3 weeks later and found out what had happened. He told his mother he was going to marry the seamstress. Your grandmother agreed, on one condition." "What condition?" Benedict asked. "That your mother never mention the baby again. Never look for her. Never ask about her. and that she stop being that little seamstress girl and become a proper Castellani woman. That she learned to look down on the servants exactly the way people had looked down on her. Mr. Ricci raised his eyes. For 42 years, I've watched your mother do exactly that, sir. She became better at it than your grandmother ever was. Haven't you ever wondered why the person in this house who is hardest on the staff is the one who once worked here herself? Benedict rested one hand on the back of a chair. That baby, he said. She named her Rosa, Mr. Ricci said. She gave her that name during the 3 days she was still allowed to hold her. Ever since your father died, she's hired people to search for decades, through multiple investigative firms, but found nothing. That child would be a grown woman now, if she's still alive. Benedict stood there for a long time in that small room. He thought about the woman who, only 4 hours earlier, had been gripping the wrist of a 26-year-old woman to force her to sign, and he understood that his mother had climbed 2 flights of stairs without an elevator to repeat the exact thing that had destroyed her own life, and she called it saving someone. This doesn't excuse her, he said. No, Mr. Ricci said. It only explains her. Those are 2 different things. The family meeting took place Tuesday afternoon. 14 people gathered in the great room at Winnetka. Vittoria wasn't there. Benedict gave no opening remarks. He placed the file in front of Nico Barone and pushed it forward about 4 inches. Read it, he said. Nico didn't open it. He looked at the cover, and everyone in the room watched his shoulders drop. You've trusted me to count your money for all these years, he said, and you never once asked me how much I had. It was the only thing he said in his own defense, and it was so poor a defense that no one in the room answered him. Camille Rossi sat 3 chairs away. She didn't cry. She didn't deny anything. When Benedict turned toward her, she spoke very clearly, loudly enough for all 14 people to hear. You looked at that maid in a way you never looked at me once in 6 years. I couldn't have that, so I made sure she couldn't have it either. Benedict didn't answer her. He picked up the file and turned toward the other 14 people. Tomorrow morning, I am turning over every financial record this family has to the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois, he said. Everything, including my part. In return, we have an agreement allowing us to move every remaining asset onto legitimate legal footing within 18 months. Anyone who wants out can leave before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Chairs shifted against the floor. No one stood up. You're not going to deal with them yourself? One man asked, nodding toward Nico. No, Benedict said. My father would have. That's why my father died on the church steps. Nico Barone and Camille Rossi were arrested Thursday morning at 2 separate addresses. No one fired a shot. No one was hurt. On the noon news that day, a reporter called it the largest voluntary disclosure ever made by a Chicago crime family. Benedict turned off the television before the report was finished. Declan Rourke came to the bakery in Pilsen on a Saturday morning, 10 days after the arrests. He was 52 years old and arrived with 2 men, both of whom stayed outside on the sidewalk. Rourke walked in alone, ordered a cup of coffee, paid for it, then sat down at the table beside the window without taking a single sip. Maya knew who he was before he opened his mouth. She was 6 months pregnant, and she remained standing behind the counter. Ruth came out from the back, and Maya asked her to please go inside. But this time, Ruth didn't listen. She stayed exactly where she was. I didn't come here to hurt you, Rourke said. The problem is that everybody knows about this place now. People know Benedict Castellani just turned his entire family's books over to the federal government, and they know why. As long as you're standing here, the whole city knows this bakery is the softest place to reach him. The door opened. Benedict walked in, went straight to the table, sat down across from Rourke, and placed a thin set of papers between them. You want Calumet Harbor, he said. You've wanted it for 11 years. Rourke didn't answer. The entire route, Benedict said. The dock leases, the loading rights, the contractor list. I'll sign it over right here. You won't pay $1. It's the most valuable thing my family still controls. Rourke stared at the papers for a long time. In exchange for what? He asked. You take the harbor, Benedict said. I take her. You win, Declan. Take it and get out of the old woman's bakery. The entire bakery fell silent. Rourke remained seated for another half-minute, then pulled out a pen, signed the empty space, folded his copy, and stood. At the door, he turned back. Your father could never have done what you just did, he said. Yes, Benedict said. That's why he died. 2.5 months later, Maya went into labor 3 weeks early, and Maeve called an ambulance at 4:15 in the morning. The baby was born close to noon, healthy, and when Maya opened her eyes, Benedict was sitting in the chair beside the bed, exactly where he had been since the night before. That afternoon, Someone stood in the doorway of the hospital room and didn't dare step inside. Vittoria Castellani stood there with both hands empty. Maya saw her first. "You tried to take this baby away from me," Maya said. "I won't forget that." Vittoria didn't defend herself. "But I know why you did it," Maya said. "Someone told me." Then she looked down at the baby girl in her arms. "Her name is Rosalie," she said. Vittoria Castellani collapsed to her knees right there in the hospital doorway. That woman hadn't cried in decades, and she cried there in a hospital hallway, in front of a young woman who had once scrubbed the floors of her home. She didn't apologize to her son. She looked at Maya and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Kelly," 3 times. The records clearing Sean Kelly's name were released 6 weeks later as part of the public statement about the case. The remaining hospital debt was paid from assets seized from Nico Barone under the restitution process for victims. Benedict brought a copy to the bakery and placed it on the table without saying a word to claim any credit. "I'm not offering you anything anymore," he said. "I'm just here, every day." Maya held that paper for a long time. Then she was the one who stepped toward him. 14 months later, the sign above the bakery door was changed to Kelly and Daughter. Ruth sold the shop to Maya for half its market value and said she had waited 20 years for someone worthy of it. Castellani Holdings became a legitimate logistics company, with not a single line of business left off the books. The wedding was held in the backyard behind the bakery with 23 guests. Maeve had returned to school and appointed herself master of ceremonies, even though no one had asked her to. Vittoria held Rosalie throughout the ceremony, carefully, like someone terrified of dropping the most precious thing she had ever been trusted to hold. That evening, after almost all the guests had gone home, Mr. Ricci handed Vittoria a letter mailed from Milwaukee, written in a woman's handwriting. She opened the outer envelope and managed to read only the first line. "I was told that you've been looking for me for a very long time." Vittoria Castellani sat down on the back steps with the letter in her hands and couldn't bring herself to unfold the rest of it. This story leaves us with a few things worth thinking about. Remaining silent in the face of injustice is also a way of taking part in that injustice. And sometimes, a question asked at the right moment is worth more than an apology offered when it is already too late. No one is born beneath anyone else, and a person's worth has nothing to do with whether they scrub floors or sit at the head of the table. And pain that is never healed will find a way to repeat itself, sometimes through the very hands of the person who once suffered it. If today's story touched your heart, please leave a like, share it with someone you believe needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue listening together to meaningful stories every day. How do you feel about Maya, about Benedict, and especially about Vittoria? And has there ever been a moment in your own life when you realized you had remained silent about something you should have spoken up about? Please leave a comment. We truly want to hear the feelings you carry deep in your heart. May you and your family always have good health, a joyful life, and peace in every day. Goodbye, and we'll see you again in the next video.